Hello and welcome back to our podcast. This is episode 15 of the series Unraveling the Revelation, a detailed look at the influences on the Church of God's interpretation of the book of Revelation. I'm Dale Rood. I invite you to send comments, questions, or criticism to me at the following email address: respondingtoreligiousramblings@gmail.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and so that way you can receive updates when they become available. Also, consider sharing this with a friend. Before I begin our information for today, our series for today, let me make a few comments. On a personal level, this was probably the most difficult episode so far for me to prepare for. There's a couple of reasons. One, this particular date that we're going to be discussing today involves a lot of historical information. And unfortunately, I was not the best history student back in my high school days or even in my college days. And so I didn't have a particular interest in history back then, and I regret that now. So in my later years, I'm having to go back and catch up on a lot of things that I should have learned. And so thankfully, I do have some individuals in my life that I can talk to every now and then and get their take on things, and that helps out a lot. But otherwise, I've spent the last 2 days doing a lot of research to try to understand what our Sixth Seal brethren were talking about with regard to historical events and how they were, how they considered those to be part of the overall timeline of the Seventh Seal timeline. And so that's one reason. The second reason is that I don't have all of my books with me here in my current location. I do have some, and I have enough to do what I need to get done. But it would be nice to have additional books for reference. And so I don't have it. I don't have that, and I'm at a disadvantage there. And secondly, there's not a. Sometimes there's just not a lot of consistency between the early writers. Brother Goodnight, who was the first person to actually preach on the Seventh Seal message, he would talk about things in his books, and then in later revisions of the books, he would refer to different events. And so it was hard for me to try to keep track of what he was trying to say and what message he was conveying with particular interest to the historical side. Brother Goodnight and others, they were not very educated in secular history. Now, you don't have to be educated in secular history to know Scripture or to be led by the Spirit of God into the deeper things of God. I'm not implying that. But it certainly helps whenever someone has a good working knowledge of the historical events. And so I found myself having to do more additional research on what they were saying as they were evolving in their understanding. And then also my weakness in not knowing a lot about some of the historical events. So that's why it took me a little bit longer. As you may have noticed, I've been releasing one podcast a day, at least one podcast a day. But this one took me longer to prepare. So thankfully, I think the next few podcasts are going to be much more easier to put together, and I should be able to get those out fairly soon and wrap up this particular series. Okay, with that said, let's look again at this chart here where we're comparing the sixth and the seventh seal teachings. Now, as I said last time, when I talk about sixth seal view, what I'm really referring to is the teachings that were under the Evening Light movement. Specifically, Brother Warner and some of those early pioneers of the Church of God. They referred to themselves and their time period as the Evening Light, and in some cases they were referred to as the Evening Light Saints. So today, if you were to talk to someone who still holds to a lot of those views and does not accept the message of the seventh seal, and you were to refer to them as sixth seal, they most likely would not understand what you were even talking about. They would have no clue what that means, or that they're part of a sixth seal message. So that's really a label that we've used into describing a particular line of thought. And then, obviously, the seventh seal is the message that was developed in the 1930s and has been taught among the seventh seal Church of God movement. So I pointed out that basically the seventh seal teaching was founded on the same dates and the same methodology and principles of what was being taught by the Evening Light. So the Evening Light taught 4 church ages: paganism, papalism, Protestantism, and Evening Light. And the dates that they used were AD 33, AD 270, AD 1530, and AD 1880. The seventh seal continued with that same line of thought, using even some of the timeline symbols, but they added some additional dates in there. And so one of the dates they added is 530. And then they also added 1730, 1930, and then at the end, 1980. So today we're going to be looking at that first date that was added, 530 AD. As you can see, it was embedded in the 2 dates of 270 and 1530. Okay, and we all know that during those, as was taught, during those years, there was an apostasy of the church that took place and the development of papalism, which is known as the Roman Catholic Church, or Roman Catholicism. During these years was a very dark day in which even in the secular world, there were millions of people that were killed by this religious system working along with the state system. So it was kind of be a Catholic or die. And so the seventh seal movement, they divided that particular time period up into 2 church epochs or church ages. And they refer to them commonly as the second seal and the third seal. So we're going to be talking about AD 530 in this particular episode. So as we've shown before, we've already covered all the 6 seal dates, or the dates that were used by the Evening Light, namely 1880, 1530, 270, and AD 33. Now we're going to be looking at the 7 seal dates, starting with 530 AD, which consisted of the end of pagan power and the beginning of papal power. Okay, let's get a little background. So in Revelation, the first 2 chapters are 7 letters that were written to 7 churches. Brother Warner and the pioneers of the Evening Light movement did not subscribe to the doctrinal position that's commonly held today in the Church of God, as well as other Protestant churches, that the 7 church letters represent 7 sequential ages. They did not subscribe to that teaching. Basically, what they taught was that those letters represented conditions that could exist at any time in church history. So they were not something that was going to happen sequentially or one age after the next, but that those conditions that were described, they could be something that is working in an individual's life. They could be something that's working maybe even at a congregational level, or something that's working within the whole church age. So that's a lot different than what we're used to hearing today. In fact, F.G. Smith stated that a revelation symbol cannot represent itself in the literal. So in other words, The 7 church symbols cannot represent 7 literal churches, because a symbol does not represent the literal aspect of it. Now, we do find in one place where Brother Warner, at least I've been able to only find one. If you find additionals, please, I would be thrilled to find more about this. But I've searched the gospel trumpets, and I couldn't find anything other than this. He did in one of his articles, and I noted this earlier in a previous episode, he referred to 7 epochs of time in the church age. But he did not appeal to the 7 church letters for justification for his conclusion. So he wasn't referring to those church ages and saying that they were sequential 7 epochs of time. Rather, what he was referring to was the 7 seals in Revelation 5 through 8. Okay, and you can see those there in color at the bottom of this chart. He said the first seal was the primitive apostolic church, or the morning of light. The second seal was the red horse pagan Rome. The third seal was the rise of the apostasy. The fourth seal was the papal beast. The fifth seal was the period of stagnation or church formality, and also where the symbol of the martyrs being under the altar was placed. And then the sixth seal, the evening light, and of course the great earthquake that took place. And then while he refers to the seventh seal, he says nothing about it. I've never been able to find anything where Brother Warner had reached any kind of conclusions or even had any kind of discussion about what was to take place in the seventh seal. Okay, that's important to know, because today we get so used to lining up those church letters that I guess we just assume that everybody did that. Well, even within the history of the Church of God, that was not the case. So let me back up here. So once again, you can see where those letters fit in there across the bottom. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Okay, so they're there, and again, they're embedded in the overall foundation of the evening light teaching. But this is what happened. So this is a very early seven seal Church of God Revelation chart. And this is more of a picture format. So rather than a line drawing or those kind of things, they actually had someone go out and paint these symbols. And they started using these kind of charts. And so what you find here is usually on the left-hand side, it will talk about the old tabernacle. It will show the arrangement of the furniture within the temple and the symbology that's associated with that. And sometimes on the chart you would find the traditional 5-heart chart, which talks about sanctification and unity and being restored back to that pure state. And then on the left-hand side at the bottom, it would typically have the 4 beasts that we find back in the book of Daniel. And then it would start with the book of Revelation. And as you can see here, there's beasts, there are there's the beast series, there's a witness series, there's the trumpet series. You can see the Bible as from the top where it's initially open, then it's closed and gradually becomes open again. And so there's a lot of symbology going on here. And each one of these symbols they wrote about in their books describing overall the state of the church and the enemies that she would face down through the years from the day of Pentecost until the second coming of Christ. Okay, so this next chart, hope this works. There we go. I just included those church letters so you can see how that they line up with the existing church ages. So you've got Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So that's how that's basically what Goodnight was. That was kind of what he was, I don't want to say known for, but that was one of the things that he came up with. that had not been previously taught. And so when we talk about the Ephesus church, we all know that that's referring to the first seal. When we talk about the Laodicean church, for instance, we know that we're referencing the last seal and the day in which we live. The Philadelphia church represented the sixth seal, and so forth and so on. So that's how they fit in within those dates there. That's how that they are cross-referenced. Now, this opened up a whole new line of prophecy, so to speak. So what this did was it allowed for the symbols or their interpretations in each letter, those 7 letters in Revelation 2 and 3, it allowed them to be used as part of prophecy for each successive age. So rather than just having the seals and the trumpets and the beast and all, it now allowed for each individual church, the text that went along with it, the scriptures that went along with it, to apply to the 7 church ages in a sequential manner. Okay. Also, in some of those, at least a couple of those church ages, there's a symbol that has a timeline associated with it. Now, we've already talked about this in the previous episodes, but sometimes a day would be interpreted as a year, or in some cases they interpret it as a century. And then there's the hour symbol, and I don't think we've actually talked about that yet, but we will be talking about that in upcoming episodes. So just to note that this opened up additional symbols that could be used in developing that overall timeline. Okay, so then it was taught now the conditions for each of the 7 symbolic churches were applied to the overall condition of the church age believed to be represented by that symbol. So when it would talk, for instance, about Laodicea, and it would say you have need of nothing and you're lukewarm, they would apply that to this current day in which we live. When they talked about some of the other symbols within those various letters, they would apply those to that church age. And so it just kind of gave more description to what may or may not have been happening. Now, for some people, especially our friends in the sixth seal or in the evening light movement, they don't really see this as sometimes being mismatched. And I'll give you some examples. So, in the letter to Ephesians, the Pergamos, Thyatira, they receive both praise and rebuke from the writer, from God. So those 3 churches, they were doing some good things and they were praised for that, but they were doing some things that were not so good and they were rebuked for that. Okay, well, those 3 ages, as it's taught, represent the morning time, so that's Ephesus, the dark ages, that's Pergamos, and the Thyatira church age, which is the day of Lutheranism, or that early part of Protestantism. Okay, so you have to start thinking now, okay, so he praised them and he rebuked them. So there was a mixture of both within that single letter. Okay, just something to observe. The church, the letter for Smyrna and the letter for Philadelphia received only praise and encouragement. Well, that makes sense to us, or at least those people that might be looking on and wondering what this is all about. The evening light, we would expect them to receive praise and encouragement because that was the beginning of the evening light movement. So this was supposed to represent Brother Warner and those early saints there. But it also, in that same church age, represents what they believe to be the apostasy or the Anderson movement. So in that case, why would they receive praise and encouragement? Okay, the same thing with Smyrna. Smyrna is that second church age, which was going into apostasy. So people looking on that are trying to figure all this out, they see this as inconsistent, because here that church age is given only praise and encouragement, but it's the same church age of the apostasy. Now, typically what's done, and I'm not going to get into all the symbology. This whole series is not about symbols, but typically what is the way I've heard it taught is that during those times of apostasy, God's always had a church, and so part of the message, the praise and the encouragement part of it, applied to the church that was really standing, and then the other part of it that was going into apostasy might be represented in another series where they're not being praised, but they're being rebuked. Okay, so that's typically how that's explained. Okay, and then finally, in the Sardis and Laodicea age, they only receive rebuke. Now, this is the day of Wesleyanism, the second half, if you will, of the Protestant age, and then the seventh sealed Church of God. So the observer looking on would say, wait a minute, this is a whole new movement, and there's nothing good about it. It's only been rebuked by God. And why would God be rebuking the Wesleyans or the teachings of the Wesleyans whenever that was a step in progress, namely sanctification? Why would he be rebuking them? So you can see why it raises questions in people's minds that they just don't see how these events, these sequential events, literally line up with the seven sequential church ages. Okay. And there's another thing I'll just add here. Again, I'm not here to try to persuade anybody of one thing or the other. I'm just here to try to present the information. But it's been pointed out before, like we are living in the time of, as the teaching goes, of Laodicea. Now, the Evening Light would say, well, that Laodicean, it could apply to anybody. It could apply to those people that we talked about in the New Testament, Diophantries. It could apply to them. It could apply to someone in the Dark Ages or someone in Protestant. So they didn't restrict those conditions to a specific time period. Okay? So basically, the thought is that, and if you have any children, I have children. 3 children. And if I was constantly telling my children when they were growing up, let's say I picked one of them, and I said, hey, you're ugly and stupid. Now that's not politically correct to say that, but what if I did that? What if I said their whole life, everything that you do is just stupid and you're ugly and you're bad and all? How do you think that child is going to grow up? And what are they going to think when they grow up? They're going to think, well, I'm stupid. My dad said I'm stupid. I'm not very good at this. I'm ugly, and people don't like me. And so they're going to evolve into what they were told that they were. And that is true of the Laodicean. If you tell people that the church age today, like it or not, it's lukewarm, and people's lukewarm all around, and that's the spirit of the age. Well, what's more likely to happen? What's more likely to happen is they might become lukewarm. Now, I know, and I've never heard any of the preachers say you have to be lukewarm, but when it's believed that you are surrounded with the spirit of lukewarmness, and it's in the people that you worship with, it's part of the group that you fellowship with, it's the overall spirit of the age. You're likely to be more influenced by lukewarmness than maybe if you had been told something that's more positive. So I'm just throwing that out there for what that's worth. These are the kind of thoughts that individuals looking on have about the message of Seven Seal and the sequential church age. All right, so let's get to 5:30. That was just background information. Now, you're going to have to bear with me on this one. I'm going to try to do the best I can to explain the historical side of this lesson, and that's going to be a challenge. So bear with me. I'm going to give you the resources as we go through. If I totally fail at this, you got the resources. You can read them for yourself. And in fact, I would definitely encourage you to do that. That's true of any of this stuff. Don't take anything I have to say as the absolute way it is. I'm on a journey. I've been on a journey for quite a few years now, and this is part of my journey that I'm sharing with you. I have more questions than I do answers, and that's why I invite you to share, your thoughts with me. I have had a few individuals that contacted me, and I've really had some great conversation, and I love it. So if this doesn't come out right on the historical side, it's my fault. It's my fault for sure. And I would please invite you to go and do your own research. Okay, so 530 AD. There's two things that's believed to have taken place. And that is, first of all, the end of the pagan power. The end of that Roman empire. That Roman system. Whose religion was paganism. And then the beginning of that second power, which was more on the spiritual side, and that is the papal power or Roman Catholicism. Okay, so I've showed that here in these two little diagrams. The first one showing the end of paganism was to have taken place by 530 AD, which is 260 years away from the 270 date that we talked about in our previous podcast. That's under the Sixth Seal teaching. Okay, the second part was the development of papal Rome, which was believed to have taken place in 530 and extended through 1530. And that's a period of 1,000 years. So we're going to go back and we're going to ask ourselves those 5 questions about 530 that we've been asking about the previous dates. And here they are here. So we're going to break them down one at a time. Okay, the first question. Looking forward in prophecy. I cannot emphasize enough that we want to start. Prophecy looks forward. So looking forward in prophecy, what symbol or symbols of time is used to reach AD 30? Where do we find a span of 260 years that gets us from 270 AD to 530? Where do we find that span of years believed to be prophesied in Scripture? Now, I'm putting this out here. I invite your comments. I invite your input. But I don't know of any Old Testament prophecy that leads us to the year 530 AD. Now, what I do know is in the Old Testament, there are prophecies in the book of Daniel regarding the demise of the Roman Empire or pagan Rome. And also, there are prophecies that talk about the development of papal Rome. And the problem is, with those prophecies, there's no timeline associated with it. So we know it's going to happen, but we just don't have any kind of timeline that helps us along to get to a specific date. Okay? Now, we can, in some cases, we can kind of generally figure things out, but to get us down to the specifics like we've been doing in some of these previous dates, it just doesn't exist in the Old Testament. Now, in the New Testament, there is a little bit that talks about the man of sin, where it says 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse number 3 and 4, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except what? There be a falling away first. That the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalting himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So here we see a prophecy that's very commonly believed to be a prophecy of the development of not only the Catholic Church, but the position of the Pope. And it was very common in the early days of Protestantism for them to identify the Pope as the man of sin. In fact, that was very common. That's what caused a lot of the problems. Okay, so I don't see anywhere in looking forward, I don't see anywhere in the New Testament or the Old Testament that gives us a specific timeline or a symbol that represents some kind of timeline. Okay? All right. Now, I do see an error. It's actually a very obvious error. And it's regarding the 10-day tribulation period. So let me read this. This is in Revelation, the 2nd chapter. It says, "Fear none of these things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful in death, and I will give thee a crown of life." Okay? Now, this scripture here is in the passage that is used to describe the conditions going on in the church in Smyrna. And as you recall from our charts, Smyrna was that second time period. Let me just back up real quickly, and I'll show you that in our chart here, just to kind of put it in place. So here, see that's church age between 270 and 1530, or 530. That's the Smyrna church age. Okay? Now we're talking about, in our lesson tonight, or today, whatever it is, whatever time it is when you're watching this, we're talking about the time period between 530 and 1530. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out, because as we go along, we see that there was a misuse of that particular time symbol. And I'm going to explain that in more detail. So these 10 days, this time of tribulation where they were going to suffer, the saints there in that time period, they were going to suffer. They were going to be cast into prison. They were going to be tried. There was going to be a period of in this case, a symbol of tribulation for 10 days. And they would even lose their life in some cases. But he said they're going to be rewarded with a crown of life. Okay, that's in the second seal. That's under Smyrna. However, Brother Goodnight applied the 10 days of tribulation to the third church age, or the age of the letter to the church at Pergamos. Further, he assigned 100 years for each day and reached a total of 1,000 years, or a millennium of years. And those are specifically from 530 to 1530. So what he did here, let me just read to you what he said. This is a quote here. This is from Chart Explanation of Revelation in Brother Goodnight's 1933 book. This was the first one that was published. "Then we hear they are to have tribulation for 10 days. He's continuing on with the thought here. "In this, we would hardly think these 10 days to mean 10 literal days, as in time. So we are going to use these 10 days as in other day symbols, yet future, and by doing so in connection with history, prove these 10 days as symbolizing 1,000 years from the time that papal Rome power is fully developed and exalted up unto the heavenly place, to the rise of Protestantism from 530 AD to 1530 AD. We see prophecy in this church age pointing out into the next church age." So you see what he did here? He took a symbol from one church age. He took it and he applied it to the next church age. And he also assigned that symbol one day for 100 years. And we've talked about that in our previous podcast, that we don't really see support for that in Scripture. We do see support for it in the way that it was presented, but in terms of Scripture, we don't really see where one day represents 100 years. But that's how he used it, because that had already been established in the sixth seal teaching. Now, when you do this, when you take a symbol and you apply it from one church age to another, it's not only inappropriate, but it really undermines the whole method of prophetical interpretation. What that does is open the door to say, well, this one doesn't fit here, so I'm going to put it over here, or I'm going to put it back here. We don't have the liberty to do that. It also would make the observer question whether or not this was just used as a backdating technique to arrive at 530 from the 1530 that was already established. So we already had 1530 that was established, and that's in the third time period. So if we take those 10 tribulation days from the second church age and now apply them to the third church age, and we've already got the end date established, then all we do is just backdate and we get to 530. So it makes you wonder if that's what had not happened here, and that's how we initially arrived at 530. Okay, later in his book, Goodnight applied the symbols in Revelation 20 to the same millennium of 1,000 years, which he stated had started in 530. So once he basically established 530 by taking those 10 days and moving them to a different church age, then he made the 20 years, or the 1,000 years in Revelation 20, match up with that 1,000 years. When in fact that 1,000 years should have never been even included in that third church age, according to these 10 tribulation days. Okay? Hope I made that clear. Now, later seven seal advocates corrected his error and used a day for a year method to apply the 10 days of tribulation there to a literal 10-year period, and I'm using a quote here, 10-year period under the Roman Emperor Diocletian from AD 302 to AD 312, when persecution was very severe. So, and this particular quote was taken from the Book of Revelation Explained, Volume 1 by Brother Earl Borders. That's where I was able to find this reference. And he's not the only one that did that. But so basically what he did was he kept it in the correct church age, that second church age, and he used one day for a year. And so basically he applied it to specific years, 302 to 312, that's a 10-year span, and said this is when persecution was very severe. Okay, so looking at that, we have to decide within ourselves, is that what that symbol was referring to? Was it referring to a literal 10-year period, or was it supposed to be representing some other kind of timeline? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I'm just letting you know that's how it was used, because they did recognize that Brother Goodnight made an error, and they made a correction for it. Okay, next question. What historical event was believed to be prophesied in the Old Testament or New Testament to happen in the year 530 AD? Okay, well, in the Old Testament, it was prophesied of the breakup or the splitting of the Roman Empire, and also the demise of pagan Rome. So most Bible scholars believe, and including the Church of God, believe that the image found in Daniel 2 represents four ancient empires, namely Babylon, which was the head of gold, the Medo-Persia Empire, which was represented by the chest and the arms of silver, the Grecian Empire, which was represented by the belly of bronze, and the Roman Empire, which was represented by the legs of iron. Further, it is believed that the two legs represent the division of the Roman Empire in 395 AD, when it was divided into the Western and Eastern empires. Also, they believe that the 10 toes represent the 10 minor kingdoms that eventually came into being after that division took place. So, Church of God leaders believe the stone that's represented there in that prophecy, in that account, represented the coming in of the kingdom of God, which would last forever. So during the years of those kings and so forth, during the years of that particular symbol, that the kingdom of God was going to come into play, and of course the outcome of that was that it broke to pieces this image there, this image of a man, so to speak. Also in Daniel, the 7th chapter, it's believed that the 4 successive world kingdoms that we just referred to in Daniel, and that was specifically in Daniel's dream, that they're represented by the 4 beasts, and that the little horn that came up on the 4th beast, there in Daniel 7 and 8, verse number 8, was the office of the Roman Catholic Pope. So the Roman Empire there was found to be in prophecy. In the New Testament, the establishment of papal Rome, as we already just talked about, is believed to be foretold, and that the man of sin would be revealed. And we just read that scripture earlier. I think it was the same one. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God and is worshipped, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So we do have some historical evidence that were prophesied to be events, upcoming events in the New Testament. Okay, so now this is where we're going to get into some as they say, get down in the weeds. So please bear with me, be patient with me as I go through this. I'm going to try to explain what these brethren were saying and try to make it match the historical events. All right. The question is asked, what happened in the year 530 AD that was significant enough to mark it as the beginning year of the apostasy of the church? And I just realized I have a mistake there. Not the beginning of the apostasy of the church, but really I should have had on there that was representing the breakup of the Roman Empire, the demise of pagan Rome, and the establishment of papal Rome. So I apologize there. I'm going to fix that after this episode. So in other words, what happened in 530 of any significance to support what the brethren were teaching about that particular year? Okay, so the Roman Empire divided in 395 AD and became the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. Furthermore, the Western Empire suffered several Gothic invasions and in AD 455 was sacked by the Vandals. Rome continued to decline after that until AD 476, when the Western Empire came to an end. The Eastern Empire, the other half, also known as the Byzantine Empire, and I'm probably killing these words, survived for almost 1,000 more years before being overtaken by the Ottoman Empire in 1453. These events are well documented in secular history books. So if we're just looking at the piece that was believed to have taken place in 530 AD, we find nothing of significance about that date with regard to pagan Rome's demise. So, the biggest part of it, the Western Church, the Western Empire was dissolved by AD 476. The Eastern Empire continued for another 1,000 years, so there's nothing significant about those historical events that would seem to indicate that something happened in 530. Okay. So, Constantine, we've all probably, I do know a little bit about this from history that I remember. Constantine, who was the emperor, the Roman emperor from 306 to 337 AD, he had a conversion experience to Christianity, and we probably all heard that story, how that came about. That happened in the year 312, and subsequently he Christianized, I probably should put that in quotes, the Roman Empire. So there, instead of going from, you must be serve these pagan gods, now he's saying we must recognize the one true God. That's what he did, and that's what he's known for. Well, he died in 337 AD. So take note that it was in 312 that this the state religion became Christianity. Okay, so Goodnight, and then even people subsequent to him, they often quote from this book called written by George Park Fisher. It's called History of the Christian Church, and in that particular book are the following three quotes. It was around 200 years after Constantine, the first supposed Christian emperor of the Roman Empire, that paganism had vanished. That's on page 98. And I did download, you can download a copy of this book. Just Google it. Google the title and Google the author's name, and you can download a PDF version of this book. It's quite thick. Second quote, in AD 530, the decisions of the many synods was approved by the Roman bishop Boniface II. That's on page 138. So here we have a specific mention of the year 530. The third quote, the day of critical inquiries and discussions was passing by, and a settling down of the Catholic Orthodox doctrines was being generally accepted. So, what was concluded from this, and I'm going to quote from a book titled The Revelation with Gospel and Prophecy, Past, Present, and Future, and this was actually a revision of a previous book in which Goodnight was involved in. But these brethren took his writings and revised it in 1955. This is the one that's probably more widely known among Church of God circles. So those three quotes I just gave you, that's where they came from, this book. And so they concluded then, based on those and everything else considered, that, and I'm going to give you the quote here, Constantine's reign was around 323 to 330. With the ending, or with the adding of 200 years, brings us up to 530. So, basically, the dates they use here for his reign are not consistent with the dates that are in, the history books today. So there's a discrepancy there, and there's a discrepancy in the end of his reign. It was supposedly to happen, according to these brethren, in 330 AD, but modern historians put that at 337 AD, a difference of 7 years there. So, but what they did was they took that 330 date that they were using, added 200 years based on what Fisher said with regard to how long it took for paganism to vanish, that 200-year span there, and they added those together, and they came up with 530. Okay, So that's how the brethren in the seventh seal justified that date of 530 AD. Okay, so I just wanted to present that information to you. Okay, next question. In what secular historical literature do we find the year 530 AD listed as a major milestone in church history? Okay. There are countless secular historical books that have been written about the split of the pagan Roman Empire and the kingdoms that resulted. This is true also regarding the establishment of Papal Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, and the office of the Pope, or what we'll refer to as the Man of Sin. You could find, there's just probably hundreds, if not thousands of books that talk about those events. Those are the classes I should have paid more attention to when I was younger, but I didn't. But there's just a ton of them out there. I mean, you can Google this stuff and you'll have just a long list of links that you can go to and read about this stuff. Okay, so the details are outside the scope of this effort. However, it's very difficult to sort through those historical events and determine which one, if any, are to be included in a prophetical timeline or what date should be used. This is what I've been trying to do for the last 2 days. I've been trying to sort through that stuff and line it up with what these brethren were saying and the history books. And it's difficult, especially when the brethren themselves would send out later revisions from what they had previously published, and then you have to start all over. So let's just say by the time I got done, I had a headache, a big time headache. So that's why, as that implies, the details are outside the scope of this effort. I'm not taking it any further. I've taken it as far as I can, and that's hopefully I've been able to explain this to you so that you can at least go do your own investigation. Just to give you an example, just a simple question: who was the first pope? Type that in. Who was the first pope? Well, we know for sure it was one of the bishops of Rome, but even there's no general agreement on which bishop was the first pope. Based on what authority, and some have said, well, based on the fact that he was granted this authority or this council, first time they used the word father. There's a lot of things out there that even among educated historians, that they don't agree who the first pope was. Some of them say it's Leo I. Some of them say it's Boniface II. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church says it was St. Peter. Well, I know we don't accept that. But that's what they say, and then they have a whole history of all the popes that succeeded supposedly Pope Peter. And there's even some issues with some of those popes. So at one time there was 2 popes that were recognized. So anyhow, just a little basic detail like that is very difficult to reach a definitive answer. So some speculation is required when sorting through history. It is easy to have a pre-selected date. Now pay attention here. It's very easy to have a pre-selected date based on a specific desired end date, and then go search this vast amount of history and find a historical event that supports your desired timeline. I can't help but believe that there was some of that was done in developing these timelines, and we've discussed some of these things in the past now. Okay, I'm not trying to question their motives or anything, or their intents, but it's easy. Like this whole thing started in 1880, and we've already shown that there was some backdating going on to get these dates. Well, once you have the date, then you can read the history books and find something in it that will support that date, because there's a ton of that stuff out there. So you really have to. It's some speculation that's involved in this, and And no doubt there's some of this stuff that is historically accurate, that really would support a prediction, okay, or a specific timeline. So I'm just going to leave that there. In what Church of God writing do we see 530 A.D. and who was the author? Well, the earliest reference that I could see to 530. Now remember, this came from the Evening Light, early years of the Evening Light, and they did not teach the 7 time periods based on these church ages. But the first quote or reference that I saw to it was in the Gospel Trumpet on August the 8th of 1887. This was by D.S. Warner himself. Here's what he had to say. About 270, the apostasy began. In 325, at the Nicene Council, the Bishop of Rome was made head over the whole ecclesiastic organization which had taken the place of the true church. In 530, he was referring to this Bishop of Rome by the name of Boniface II. He was made Pope and invested with civil power. Then followed 1,000 years of utter darkness, when there were scarcely any souls being resurrected from the tomb of spiritual death. So here's what he assumes. He says that the apostasy began in 270. Well, in our previous podcast, we showed that the apostasy didn't begin in 270. It began even during the time when the Bible was being written. So that's an assumption there. And then the next assumption that was made is what was said at that particular, what was agreed to in that particular council. And Brother Warner says it authorized the Bishop of Rome to be the head over the whole ecclesiastic organization, which had taken the place of the true church. In other words, the Catholic Church, so to speak. And then he says but the first pope was this Boniface, because in him, or in his position, was invested the civil power. So not only the religious power, but he also was granted the civil power in the Roman system. And then he says, following 530, then is your 1,000 years. Okay, so that's the first reference that I could find, and that was made by D.S. Warner, and I wanted to put that out there for your consideration. I know some of you listening are really have an interest. Well, you must have an interest, or you wouldn't be sitting here listening to part 15. But some of you are listening, and you have a very specific interest in this particular series of episodes. So there's a nice quote for you. Okay, now let's look at this. I told you I had a headache by the time this thing was done, and so I had to bring a little bit of laughter into it. So I'm going to talk about an obvious anomaly. Now, how many of you know 40 years ago in January, so 40 years ago from this last month, that the expression, "where's the beef?" came into being? I remember back in those days. 40 years ago in 1984, Wendy's created this now famous slogan, "Where's the beef?" They ran some advertisements which featured these 3 old ladies here, and they had gone into this hamburger joint other than Wendy's, probably Burger King or McDonald's, and they purchased a hamburger. And it included a very large bun. As I'm saying this, I can hear this commercial. Very large bun, a pickle, and a small hamburger. And so this particular advertisement depicts these 3 ladies. They're seen investigating a big fluffy hamburger bun with a very small hamburger. And the little lady on the right hand side, bless her heart, she's 4 feet tall, 4 feet 10 inches tall. She was 81 years at the time. Her name was Clara Peller. And she blurts out, "Where's the beef?" And the rest is history. So I remember when that expression, they would refer to that, when you was trying to make light of something where there was no real substance to it. Somebody would say, "Where's the beef? Where's the beef?" All right. I was actually going to show you all this video and click on that link there, but I'm running a little bit long, so you can do that for yourself. Well, I'm not concerned about where's the beef. I'm concerned about where's the beast. This is another question as along my journey that, and I still have this question to this very day. So in Revelation, as it's been interpreted in both the evening light, the early days of the evening light, and the seventh seal, there's a beast that represents pagan Rome. That's that dragon there on the left-hand side. And then we have a beast that represents the Roman Catholic Church with its 1.376 billion members. And then we have a beast that represents Protestant churches, which as of this time, there are an estimated 800 million to 1 billion members within the Protestant churches. But then there's this Orthodox Church. And if you look in history and you type in the words, the Great Schism, it will tell you about the schism that took place right after, I don't have the year written down here, but around 1000 AD, shortly after that, in which this Catholic Church split into two bodies, namely the Roman Catholic Church and then the Orthodox Church. That church has 300 million members. It's bigger than any Protestant denomination. There's not even a close second. And, but yet we have no symbol that represents that body of people. I never have understood that. I do not understand that to this day. And so if anybody wants to explain that to me, I would love to hear an explanation. Because to me, that's just a big anomaly. I would think that since it's part of a third part of organized Christianity, if you will, or institutional Christianity, it would somehow be represented some way. But it's been ignored in our prophetic symbols. Now, Brother Goodnight, in his first chart, he made reference to the Orthodox Church, but there was no. It was just a casual mention. There was no discussion about where it fits in in the symbols, or symbolically. There's no discussion like that. So I just throw that out there for what that's worth. All right. Okay, so once again, please feel free to contact me. I know, I know the Church of God well enough. I know there's some people that's going to be going to take this and really look into it and have some interest. There's some people that's going to enjoy it and learn some things from it and take what's good out of it and ignore the rest. And then there's going to be some people that just don't like it. There's always those kind of people. And I knew that going into this. That's not why I went into this. I really, what I'm doing is trying to share with you my journey. And so I welcome your comments. If you don't like what I have to say, that's fine. We can disagree. We don't have to get upset or anything like that with each other. I'm not putting this out here to try to convince you of anything. So just you keep that in mind. Feel free to share your criticisms with me. Share your questions. Share your comments. We're all in this together. We're all learning. And so I really would appreciate your input. My address again is respondingtoreligiousramblings@gmail.com. Okay, our next year that we're going to look at, our next episode, we will look at AD 730. That is the second date that was created in the Seven Seal teachings. Okay, thank you for your attention.